Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Today's story comes from Lyle Hendricks, 61 years old, formerly of the San Francisco Bay Area, a man who spent over 2 decades building something with his own 2 hands, in the way that IT guys build things, with servers and spreadsheets and long nights nobody sees. Lyle's a careful man, an analytical man, the kind of guy who doesn't jump into anything without running the numbers first. But here's the thing about careful men. Sometimes the thing they're most careful about is the thing that ends up costing them the most. Lyle thought he'd found something rare out there, something that felt different from everything he'd read about online. And when the doubt finally crept in, he didn't confront it the way most people would. He didn't ask a direct question. He ran a test. A real one. The kind that doesn't just tell you about the other person. It tells you about yourself, too. We've heard a lot of these stories on this channel by now, and we actually put together a short guide pulling together the patterns we keep seeing across them. It's linked below if you want it. For now, though, this one's Lyle's, and I think it's going to sit with you a while. Here's his story, in his own words. So I guess I should start with who I was before any of this happened, because none of it makes sense if you don't understand that part first. One ran an IT consulting firm for 22 years. Small business stuff, mostly. Dentist offices, law firms, a couple of local nonprofits, that kind of client. Network setup, security, backups, the occasional migration project when somebody's ancient server finally gave up the ghost. I was good at it. Not flashy good, reliable good. The guy who shows up, fixes the thing, explains it in plain English, doesn't try to upsell you on stuff you don't need. Built a decent reputation around the Bay Area over the years. Then a bigger firm came in, undercut me on 3 contracts I'd had for over a decade, and about 8 months after that, a server migration I'd subcontracted out went sideways on a client with deep pockets and an even deeper grudge. Lawsuit. Settled, eventually. But by the time the lawyers took their cut, and I'd paid off what I owed to keep the doors from closing permanently, there wasn't a business left. There was just me, 60 years old, filling out an application for a support technician job at a company that used to lose bids to me. I took it. What else was I going to do? And I want to be honest with you here, because I think people expect a story like this to start with some big dramatic collapse. Bottle of whiskey every night. Losing the house. Something you can point to. It wasn't like that for me. It was quieter. I just sort of went numb. I'd come home from a job where I used to be the guy in charge, and now I was the guy answering tickets from 26-year-olds who called me hon without meaning anything by it. And I'd sit in my apartment and I don't know. I'd try to fix things. That was the pattern. Something in me needed a project, a system to debug. I reorganized my garage 3 times in 1 year. Redid my whole diet, cut out this, added that, tracked it in a spreadsheet, because tracking things in spreadsheets is what I know how to do when I don't know what else to do with myself. I was divorced by then, too, going on 9 years, no kids, and most of my friends from the business had drifted off the way work friends do once the work's gone. So it was just me, 60 years old, 1-bedroom apartment in San Leandro, a support job, a spreadsheet with my macros in it. It was around then, one of those nights where I couldn't sleep and didn't feel like doing anything productive with the insomnia, that I ended up down a YouTube hole. Started with some retirement calculator video, then some guy talking about how his Social Security wasn't going to cut it in California. Then, somehow, 40 minutes later, I'm watching a guy in Cebu showing off his condo with a pool view, saying his whole monthly cost of living was less than my rent alone. I watched about 6 more of those videos before I went to bed. Then I watched more the next night. I'm not proud of how much time I spent on that particular rabbit hole, but I'll say this for it. It was the first thing in about 3 years that felt like it was pointed at something instead of just being a way to pass the hours, a destination instead of a distraction. That's an important difference, I think, even though at the time I probably couldn't have told you why it mattered so much. I told myself I was just doing research. Cost of living, healthcare access, visa requirements, that sort of thing. Practical stuff. I made another spreadsheet, if you can believe that. Columns for rent, groceries, health insurance, comparing Cebu to Dumaguete to a couple of towns in Mexico I was also looking at. But somewhere underneath the spreadsheet, if I'm being straight with you, there was something else going on too. Something that had nothing to do with cost of living. I was lonely. Genuinely, quietly lonely, in a way I hadn't let myself sit with in years, because sitting with it didn't fix anything. And I'm a fixer. Or I like to think I am. That's sort of the whole problem with this story, if you want the short version. I kept trying to fix something that wasn't a technical problem. It was just a person. Turns out, those don't respond the same way a broken server does. Anyway, that's where I was, 60 years old, alone in an apartment I didn't much like, 3 spreadsheets deep into a country I'd never set foot in. I didn't know yet that in about 4 months I'd be exchanging messages with a woman named Marielle in Cebu City, and I definitely didn't know what I'd end up doing to her or to myself before this was all over. But that's where it starts. That's the man who opened up that dating app for the first time, telling himself he was just going to look. Everybody talks about Thailand when they talk about this part of the world. I want to be upfront about that, because that's actually where I started my research. Watched maybe a dozen videos about Pattaya, about Chiang Mai, guys my age showing off their bar tabs, and their girlfriends who looked like they belonged in a magazine. And I'll be honest with you, some part of me was curious. But most of what I found made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't totally articulate at first. It felt transactional in a way that was right there on the surface, no pretense about it. I'm not judging anybody who goes that route. I'm just telling you it wasn't for me. Didn't sit right in my gut, and I've learned to trust that particular feeling, even if it turned out to be sending me in a different direction that had its own problems, just quieter ones. The Philippines' content felt different. Or it felt different to me, anyway, watching it at 1 in the morning with a bag of pretzels I didn't need to be eating. Everybody spoke English. Good English, not tourist menu English. The guys in the videos talked about girlfriends who had jobs, careers even, not bar work. Call center supervisors, nurses, teachers. It read as more stable to me, more like something an actual relationship could come out of, instead of an arrangement with a countdown clock on it. I want to be clear, I know now that's not some kind of moral hierarchy. Manila's got its bar scenes too. Angeles City's basically built on it. There's exploitation in every direction if you go looking for it, and there's also genuine decent people in every direction too. I didn't understand any of that yet. I just knew Cebu videos didn't make my stomach turn the way the other stuff did. And that felt like enough of a signal at the time. So I downloaded Filipino Cupid. Told myself I was just going to look. That's the exact phrase I used, in my own head, more than once. Just going to look. I've thought about that phrase a lot since then. It's a hell of a thing, how you can lie to yourself in 4 words and mean it completely while you're doing it. I put together a profile that was, if I'm honest, pretty boring. Photo of me at a work conference in a golf shirt I didn't even like. Bio that mentioned I liked hiking, which was true maybe 6 years earlier. I wasn't trying hard. I think that's important context, because I wasn't out there hunting. I was just sort of floating, seeing what the current brought in. What it brought in, about 4 days later, was Marielle. Her profile said, 34, Cebu City, call center supervisor. Photo of her at what looked like a work Christmas party, red dress, laughing at something off camera, not posing for it the way a lot of the profile pictures were clearly posed. That's what caught me, actually, that she wasn't performing for the photo. She messaged first, said something about my hiking photo, asked if I'd ever done Osmeña Peak, which I obviously hadn't, had no idea what that even was at the time. We started talking. Just talking, for a good while, nothing more than that. She worked nights, supervising a team that handled customer support for some American telecom company, which meant her schedule ran opposite to mine in a way that actually worked out fine, because I was usually up late anyway, doing my spreadsheets, not sleeping right. She had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. First week in, I made some comment about how I was basically qualified to fix her computer problems for free forever, and she wrote back something like, "Careful, Lyle, that's how they get you. Make yourself useful, and suddenly you're stuck here." I laughed out loud in my apartment. Actual laugh, alone, at 11 at night. Hadn't done that in a while. We moved to video calls pretty quick, within the first couple weeks. Messenger, mostly. And I want to tell you something that I think matters, because I've read enough since then to know it's not always how these things go. She never once asked me for anything financial. Not a hint of it. Not those first 4 months. We talked about her family some, her mother, her 2 younger siblings, her dad's stroke a few years back that had left him needing care. She'd mention it the way you'd mention any hard thing in your life. Not fishing, not building toward anything, just being honest about her situation. I'd read enough forum posts by then, guys warning other guys, watch for the sob story early, watch for the money talk in week 1. None of that happened. 4 months of just talking, getting to know each other, her telling me about jeepney rides to work and some co-worker drama, me telling her about the Bay Area, about the business, about the divorce, more honestly than I'd talked to anybody in years, honestly. I took that as proof. I remember thinking, almost in those exact words, this is the one that's real, because look how long it took before money even came up as a subject at all. 4 months and nothing. That felt like evidence, like I'd run the test already without even meaning to, and she'd passed it clean. I didn't understand yet that 4 months of patience isn't proof of anything on its own. It's just 4 months. But, at the time, sitting in my apartment at midnight talking to a woman on the other side of the world who made me laugh for the first time in 3 years, it felt like the realest thing I had going. And I let myself feel something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Hope, I guess. Plain and simple. Hope that maybe I wasn't done yet. 5 months in, she brought up her brother. Not as a request. That's the thing I want to be precise about, because it matters. She wasn't asking me for anything directly. She mentioned it the way you'd mention a worry to somebody you trusted, in the middle of a longer conversation about something else entirely. Some Netflix show we'd both started watching. Her brother Jomar was in his 2nd year at University of San Carlos, engineering, and the tuition for the semester was due, and their mother didn't have it this time around because of some expense with their father's medication, and she was trying to figure out if she could cover it herself on a supervisor's salary, which in Cebu runs maybe 35,000 pesos a month if you're doing well. Call it $600. She never asked me. I want to say that again because I think it's the whole hinge of this part of the story. She never once typed the words, "Can you help?" I offered 15,000 pesos, which worked out to about $260 at the time. Wired it through GCash that same night. Didn't even sleep on it. Didn't run one of my usual spreadsheets. Just did it. And I felt good about it. I felt honestly, kind of proud of myself. Like I'd passed some test I didn't know I was taking. Because here's what I'd read. On forums, on Reddit threads, guys warning other guys, watch for the sob story, watch for the money conversation that comes too early, watch for her asking outright. None of that had happened. She'd told me a true thing about her family, and I'd chosen to help. That felt like the difference between being a mark and being a decent guy in a relationship with real stakes. I told myself the story mattered more than the mechanism. Financial help inside a real relationship isn't a scam. It's just what people do for people they love. I did some reading around then too, trying to understand the culture better, because I wanted to be respectful of it, not just react to it. Came across this concept, utang na loob, which doesn't translate clean into English. Closest I can get is debt of the interior, or debt of the soul, maybe. It's not like a loan you pay back with interest. It's more that a kindness creates an obligation that lasts, sometimes generations, and you carry it, and you honor it when you can. Filipino families lean on that hard, especially with money sent home from relatives working abroad. OFWs, they call them. Overseas Filipino workers. Millions of them. Half the country's economy practically runs on money wired home from Dubai, from Hong Kong, from cruise ships. A foreign boyfriend sending money isn't some weird outlier thing over there. It's a familiar shape. I didn't know that yet. Not really. But I was starting to learn it. And it made what was happening with Marielle feel less like something suspicious and more like something I was being let into. Her mother messaged me directly not long after that, first time we'd spoken. Simple message, thanked me, said something like, "We prayed for someone like you. God brought you to us at the right time." I remember sitting with that message a good while. It didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like being welcomed somewhere, which, I'll be honest with you, was a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. Not since before the divorce. Maybe not even then. There was one thing, though. Small thing. I almost didn't mention it. But I told you I'd be straight with you, so here it is. I asked, a few weeks after the tuition money, if I could talk to her father sometime. Video call, nothing formal. Just wanted to say hello, given everything she'd told me about his health. She said, sure, of course, and then it just never happened. Kept getting pushed. He's resting. He's not really up for video calls. His speech is still affected from the stroke. He gets embarrassed. Reasonable excuses, every one of them, on their own. I noted it. Filed it away somewhere in the back of my head, the way you'd note a weird noise your car makes that isn't bad enough yet to take it into the shop. I didn't think much more about it at the time. I was too busy feeling like the guy who'd done it right. Like I'd found the one relationship out of 100 that wasn't a con. Turns out that particular kind of pride is exactly the setup for everything that came after it. Though I wouldn't understand that part for a long while yet. The typhoon hit in September. I remember because it was Ondoy season. That's what they call it locally, even though Ondoy itself was years before, sort of become shorthand for the bad ones. Marielle sent me photos of the roof. Actual photos. Corrugated metal peeled back like a sardine can. Water damage running down the walls of the house her mother rented in Talisay, just south of Cebu City. Not staged. You could see her nephew's school bag sitting in a puddle in one of them, which is the kind of detail that gets you, honestly, more than any sob story would. Roof repair came to 180,000 pesos, about $3,100 for me. That one made me pause, I'll admit that. Wasn't a same-day, no-questions transfer like the tuition had been. I asked some questions first, asked for a contractor quote, which she sent, itemized, looked legitimate as far as I could tell from 6,000 miles away, with zero construction background. I sent it in 2 parts over about 10 days, told myself that was me being careful, being the analytical guy I always was, even while I was still sending the whole amount. 2 months after that, her mother's blood pressure spiked bad enough for a hospital stay in Talisay. 90,000 pesos for that one, roughly $1,550. Meds and the room and some tests. By then, I want to be honest with you, I'd stopped feeling each individual number the way I had the first one. It was starting to blur into a general category in my head. Family stuff. Necessary stuff. I decided to go see her in person that November. Booked the flight myself, United through Narita, landed in Mactan, Cebu International around midnight, and I remember stepping off the jet bridge into that wall of heat, even at midnight, humid enough you could feel it in your chest before you even got outside to the taxi line. Diesel smell, tricycles buzzing around the arrivals area. This low hum of Tagalog and Cebuano I couldn't follow a word of. She was there, waiting for me, and I want to tell you, seeing her in person, it was her. The same laugh from the video calls, the same way she covered her mouth when something really got her going. We went to dinner that first night at some place near Ayala Center. She ordered lechon, and I had my first real sinigang, and I remember thinking, this is real. This is an actual person, not some profile on a screen. Met her mother 2 days later. Small house, concrete block, tin roof freshly patched with the money I'd sent. Karaoke going 2 houses down at 8 in the morning on a Sunday, like it was nothing. Her mother hugged me like I was already family, called me anak, which Mariel told me meant something like son. Her siblings were there too, Jomar included, shook my hand formal-like, thanked me for the tuition in this careful rehearsed English that told me Mariel had probably coached him on it, which honestly just made me like the kid more. I want to tell you the truck driver in me, or the IT guy, whichever part of my brain runs the numbers, was quietly keeping a running total the whole trip. I hadn't said it out loud to anybody, not even Mariel. But I knew. 15,000 plus 180,000 plus 90,000 pesos worked out to somewhere around $5,000 total by that point. I told myself that was fine. That was manageable. That was, in the grand scheme of a $95,000 nest egg, not nothing but not catastrophic either. Met a guy at the hotel bar my last night there, retired Australian, Perth accent thick as anything, maybe mid-60s, 3 San Miguel's deep by the time I sat down next to him. Asked what brought me to Cebu, and I told him, girlfriend, her family, the whole thing, probably a little too proud of myself in how I said it. He just sort of laughed, not mean about it, more tired than mean, and said something like, mate, every Kano out here thinks he's the ATM machine that got adopted instead of just used. Said it like he'd said it to a dozen guys before me. I brushed it off, told him our situation was different. 4 months with no asks, met the family, saw the roof with my own eyes. He just shrugged, said good luck to you then, and went back to his beer. I think about that conversation sometimes, not because he was necessarily right about me specifically, but because I was so sure he wasn't. The Sari Sari store idea came up the following March. Over a video call, Mariel sitting in her bedroom with the fan going behind her, that particular rattle it made whenever it hit a certain angle. She'd been thinking about it a while, she said. A little store, snacks, soap, phone load, canned goods, the kind of place you see on basically every corner in the Philippines, sometimes 2 or 3 on the same block. She'd run the numbers herself, she said, and with a decent location near the barangay hall in Talisay, it could clear maybe 15,000, 20,000 pesos a month once it was established. Not a fortune. But hers. Something that made her independent. She kept saying that word, independent. Like she knew it was the word that would land with me. And it did land. I'll own that. Because here's the thing. Nobody tells you about being the analytical guy. Analytical guys don't actually love throwing money at problems. We love throwing money at systems. A roof repair is just the expense. A store is an investment. It's a thing that generates a return, has a structure, has inputs and outputs. My brain latched onto that distinction like it mattered, like it made this fundamentally different from everything before it. 600,000 pesos for the build-out, inventory, and the first several months of rent on the space. That's about $10,300 at the rate back then. Biggest single transfer I'd ever made in my life outside of a mortgage payment. I want to walk you through how I actually got there, because it wasn't one wire. First was 150,000 pesos for the space itself, deposit and advance rent, sent in January. Then 250,000 pesos in February for the build-out, shelving, a small fridge for cold drinks, signage. Then the rest, 200,000 pesos in March for initial stock. Rice, canned goods, cigarettes, the usual sorry inventory. By the time all three transfers had gone through, I was somewhere around $18,000 total sent since we'd started talking, which I'd calculated on my own, quietly, in a spreadsheet I never showed anybody, not even her. 18,000 out of about 98,000 I had left after the business wound down. Meaningful. Not the whole ball game yet. That distinction mattered to me a lot at the time, probably more than it should have. There was a paperwork issue that came up during all this that I want to mention, because I think it's important for anybody watching this who's thinking about doing something similar. Foreigners can't own land here, can't even really own a business outright in a lot of structures without a Filipino majority partner. So the store had to be registered in Mariel's name. Fully hers, on paper, no ownership stake for me at all. I remember asking about that, whether there was some way to protect my investment. And she said, "Of course, you'll always have it. We're building this together. Don't worry about paper." And I let that be enough. I didn't push for anything in writing. I want to say that plainly, because it's the kind of thing I'd tell somebody else never to do, and I did it anyway. For a couple months, the updates kept coming. Photos of the shelves getting stocked, a video of her hanging the sign, a small crowd of neighborhood kids buying ice candy on opening day, her looking genuinely happy in a way that didn't feel performed to me. Then, slowly, they thinned out. A photo here, a vague update there. I'd ask how sales were going and get something like, "Okay lang, doing fine, don't worry," without numbers behind it. I run a support desk for a living, or did run a business, whichever way you want to look at it. I know what it looks like when someone's dashboard stops updating. I know what silence in a system usually means. It doesn't mean everything's fine. It means somebody stopped wanting to look at the data too closely. I didn't confront her about it. Not directly. I'm not a confrontation guy. Never have been. Which is probably its own problem I could get into another time. What I did instead was something else entirely. Something that probably tells you more about who I am than anything else in this whole story. I decided to run a test. Here's what I sent Marielle on a Tuesday night in April. And I remember the exact wording because I drafted it twice before I hit send. Told her the settlement money from the old lawsuit, the last piece I'd still been owed, had fallen through. Said my lawyer called that morning. Some appeal, some delay, could be months, could be nothing at all. Told her I was basically broke for the foreseeable future. No more transfers. Might even have to push the trip I'd been talking about for June. None of that was true. Not one word. My account was sitting right where it always sat. I want to explain why I did it, because I've turned it over in my head about 1,000 times since, and I still land in the same place. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I told myself, at the time, I was running a diagnostic. That was the actual word in my head. If the money variable disappears, what's left in the system? That's how I thought about it. God help me. Like Marielle was a piece of infrastructure I could stress test instead of a person I claimed to love. First day or two, nothing much changed. She said she was sorry to hear it. Said, don't worry about the store for now. Focus on yourself. Normal enough. By day 4, I noticed she wasn't answering the good morning texts as fast. By day 6, she said she was busy at work, extra shifts, couldn't do a video call that week. By day 9, the same excuse again. I sat there in my apartment in San Leandro, watching the little seen timestamp under my messages, watching hours go by before a 2-line reply came back, and something in me that had been quiet for a year started making noise again. I want to be honest. Some small, mean part of me almost felt vindicated watching it happen. Like, there it is. There's the tell I was waiting for. I'm not proud of that. Feeling something close to satisfaction while I was also feeling my stomach turn over. Both things were true at once. I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense. It didn't make sense to me either, sitting there. The store updates just stopped completely. No photos, no, it's doing okay long, nothing. 2.5 weeks of near silence from a woman who, 4 months earlier, had been sending me videos of her hanging a hand-painted sign over a doorway. I didn't confront her over text. I've told you already, I'm not built that way. What I did instead was book a flight. One way. Didn't even tell her I was coming. Cathay Pacific, through Hong Kong this time. Cheaper fare, 3-hour layover I spent sitting in a plastic chair, not eating anything, running numbers in my head that had nothing to do with money anymore. Landed at Mactan, Cebu a little past 10 at night. Same wall of heat as always, same diesel and wet concrete smell coming off the tarmac. Took a grab straight to Talisay instead of a hotel. Didn't message her, just showed up. The store was there, sign still up, faded a little from the sun. But the shelves inside, half of what I remembered from the photos, half empty. No fridge running, I remember that specifically, because there should have been a hum, and there wasn't one. A neighbor kid was minding the place. Couldn't have been more than 14, told me in decent English that Ate Marielle wasn't around much these days. I found her at her mother's house 20 minutes later, on foot, sweating through my shirt by the time I got there. She opened the door, and her face did something I've thought about a lot since. It wasn't shock exactly. It was more like watching somebody set down something heavy they'd been carrying a long time. She didn't deny anything. That's the part one wasn't ready for. I'd braced myself for lies, for a performance, for her to tell me some story about the inventory getting stolen or a supplier who ran off with the stock. Instead, she just started crying, sitting down on the front step, and she said, in this small, flat voice I hadn't heard from her before, "I'm sorry, Lyle. Some of the money I told you the truth about. Some I didn't. We sat on that step for a while, her and me, and I didn't say anything at first. Just let her get it out. Came out in pieces. The tuition money, the roof money, the hospital money, all of that went where she said it went. She was clear about that. And I believed her. Still believe her about that part. But the store money, that was different. About half of it had gone into the actual build-out like she'd told me. The other half had gone to her ex-husband, who I hadn't known existed until that porch, sitting there sweating through my shirt in the Cebu heat, listening to a rooster somewhere behind the house that clearly had no idea what time it was. Turned out she'd been married before, Years back, annulment never finalized because the process here costs anywhere from 300,000 to 800,000 pesos and takes years, sometimes 5, sometimes longer. And she'd never had that kind of money sitting around. Her ex had shown up around the time the store money started flowing. Some debt of his own, some threat about the kids. There weren't kids, actually, I want to be clear, but some old obligation, some old fear she wasn't ready to explain to me all at once on a doorstep at 11 at night. She'd paid him off in pieces, 280,000 pesos or so total, near half of what I'd sent for a store that was supposed to make her independent, and used to buy her silence and his absence instead. I sat there, and I didn't feel the rage I expected to feel. I want to be honest about that, because I think people watching this expect a certain kind of ending. The guy screaming, throwing things, calling her every name in the book. Wasn't like that. I just felt tired. Bone tired. The kind you don't sleep off in one night. I asked her straight out, was any of it real? Any of it? And she looked at me and said, all of it was real, Lyle. That's the part you're not going to believe. But I need you to believe it anyway. She said she did love me, in whatever way that meant across a screen for over a year. And she also did what she had to do to survive a mess I never knew existed. Both things, not one canceling out the other. I flew home 4 days later, didn't stay for anything ceremonial, left about $14,000 lighter than I needed to be, on top of everything, which puts my total giving somewhere close to $18,000 over that whole stretch. Not everything I had. Not the retirement-ending catastrophe you hear about in some of these stories. But real money I don't have anymore, that I earned running cable and fixing servers for 22 years, gone into a roof and a hospital bill and half a store and a stranger's debt I never agreed to pay. Here's what I keep coming back to, and I think it's the actual lesson, not the cute one. I ran a test on a person like she was a system, and systems either pass or fail, clean binary, no in-between. People don't work that way. You strip away one variable, thinking you're isolating the truth, and all you actually do is strip away trust. And trust doesn't come back online just because you find out what you wanted to know. I got my answer. Some of it was real, some of it wasn't. And that's not a bug I can patch. That's just what people are. Messy, contradictory, doing what they have to do while also, somehow, still meaning some of what they said. I don't talk to Marielle much these days. Every few months, a message. Nothing that goes anywhere. I don't hate her. I want to say that plainly. I spent a year not asking the right questions, and then I finally asked one, the wrong way, and it cost me the chance to ever get a real answer. That's Lyle's story, and I think what stays with me about it isn't the money, honestly. Though $14,000 is nothing to shrug at for a man his age, starting over the way he was. It's that test. The idea that you could strip away everything external and finally see the truth underneath. Life doesn't usually work that clean. People carry things you don't know about. Debts, histories, obligations that predate you entirely. Sometimes the honest answer isn't a yes or a no. It's both, tangled together, and you have to decide what you can live with. Stories like Lyle's are why we put this guide together. Everything we've learned from the people who've shared what went wrong, the patterns that keep showing up, the questions that should get asked early instead of a year in, all of it gathered in one place. It's in the description, if it's something you need. If this one hit you the way it hit us putting it together, let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time, this has been Inside the Philippines. Take care of yourselves out there.